Hey everybody, happy Wine Wednesday. Hope everybody is having a fantastic day. And today we are continuing the conversation of Cabernet Franc with Chris Kenefick from Kenefick Ranch. And so they are a family owned and operated winery, and they actually first opened their doors in 1978 when Dr. Tom Kenefick, who was a practicing neurosurgeon in San Francisco, purchased 250 acres in Calistoga. So I'm thinking purchasing 250 acres back then, man, that's ahead of the time. That is beautiful. Okay? Knowing what's going to happen is incredible. So for nearly 25 years, they sold all of their grapes. And then afterwards in 2002, he retired from being a doctor and decided, let's start making our own wine instead of selling off this fantastic fruit. So we are going to be talking with Chris Kenefick, who is going to come on hopefully in a second. I saw them. Invitation is out, so hopefully they can get in pretty quickly. And I am excited because this is Ed. Hey, that was fast.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Look at that view. My
I
goodness.
know. I realize my face looks like it's a fake background behind me, but I'm sitting up at our ranch house overlooking the vineyard, so it's definitely not a fake background.
Wow. Wow. Why would you ever want to leave there? That is so
I know.
beautiful.
Usually I don't. Usually I'm just set up here, so
Yeah. Wow. Well, welcome. I have my
thank you.
barking neighbor dog again. So we're just going to ignore that. So we are talking Cab Franc here. So tell us first, how did you guys get into Cab Franc, and what is so special about Cab Franc to you guys?
Yeah, my dad was always really into Bordeaux varietals at not necessarily a young age, but when he was in college, he really started getting into French wines and respecting the Bordeaux varietals. So fast forward, obviously, quite a number of years later, when he purchased our property here in 1980, it was primarily old Italian varietals, and he completely replanted everything over to Bordeaux varietals. So we've been growing Cabernet Franc out here since the 80s, and it was one of those varietals that I think a lot of people just use as a blending grape. But when we were starting to produce our own wine label and he was tasting it, he realized how great it is and wanted to make it a standalone wine.
That's fantastic, and that is definitely one of the hashtags that we created along with Cab Franc Day is more than a blending grape, because it really gets like seriously, it gets like the short stick. It's like
Hmm.
everybody's just like, oh yeah, Cab Franc's great, let's blend it off, and they're
Yeah.
really missing the beauty that Cab Franc actually can give them in a glass.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's such a versatile grape and can be grown in so many different climates from up here where it's really warm in Calistoga all the way throughout the valley and all different regions of the world. So it's fun to see the different areas that Cab Franc is coming from.
Absolutely. And you have been in Calistoga for a long time. So, like, long before, I mean, it was an AVA, right, at that point, but nobody really, like, it wasn't the Calistoga of now.
So actually, we've been in Calistoga since it was before an AVA. It's still relatively new to the AVAs. I forget the exact year that it officially became an AVA, but I think it was 2011 or so. Um,
Oh, geez,
so it's still
I
relative.
always thought it was its own AVA for, you always hear Calistoga. So,
I know. I know. It was really surprising, and I'm surprised that it took that long for it to actually become its own AVA. But we purchased our first property here in Calistoga in 1978. We had that for about 2 years, sold it in 1980, and then moved on to the current property that we're on now. So
that
we've
ugly
been
site that you have.
I know, it's terrible. So we've been farming this land here for 42 years now, and then we started wines under our own label in 2002. So this was now our 20th year of producing wines under our own label.
So you pretty much grew up around the grapes.
I did, yeah, yeah. We would come up here. Primarily, we were living in Marin, which is pretty nearby. So I was up here every weekend, long weekends, and especially during harvest, trying to help out as much as I could. And then my dad moved up here full time in 2000, so I was still relatively young at that time, and then really grew up even more so, kind of surrounded by the vines.
And, some people, when they grow up around the vines, they're like, get me out of here, because I think there's such the romanticism to owning a winery and to being a winemaker and all of this. There's so much romantic, thought behind it. But when you're in it, you really see that it's like 90% sterilizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely a lot of work, and especially growing up, you don't, obviously being a little kid, you can't taste the final product or really know how exceptional the wines are coming off here. So I would have sips, admittedly, when I was a little kid, but I wasn't actually able to enjoy it, and I really didn't appreciate it and respect it. And so this was always the place that was the hot, dusty place that had snakes and spiders, and I didn't really know if I enjoyed coming up here too often. But then really once I got into college and a little bit after, I was trying wines from all over the world, and I just kept on coming back to our wines and realizing how special of a place we have, particularly here, and then Napa Valley and Calistoga just in general as well.
And how many cases does Kenefick Ranch produce altogether?
So total, we're producing about 3,000 cases.
Okay.
Primarily we're growers, so we sell off about 90% of the fruit
Oh,
on the
okay.
property. Yeah.
And then how much of that is Cab Franc?
Cab Franc is 100 cases, just depending on what the vintage gives us that year.
Okay. But in terms of growing the Cab Franc, how much acreage do you have of Cab Franc?
Of our total about 118 acres planted, we probably have about 15 plus acres of Cab Franc on the property. We have one larger field that's starting to get to the older side, so that'll probably be taken out in the next 7 to 8
Okay.
years. But we did take out some other varietals after this last harvest, and two of the larger fields that we have, we're replanting to Cab Franc. So we'll have a little bit more coming back.
I love replanting of Cab Franc. I love it.
Yeah.
So do you have several clones on the site, or do you stick to like a single clone?
Primarily we stick to one clone, and I'm blanking on what that is off the top of my head. We experiment with a couple different rootstocks all over
Okay.
the property. We've got currently 3 different blocks of Cabernet Franc. So on the far side of the property, we have 3 different clones of Cabernet Franc planted over there, and it holds a little bit more moisture. Then we have kind of a hillside area, and then closer to this side of the ranch, which we call our home side of the ranch.
Oh, okay. All right. So that
Yeah.
you get quite a bit Cab Franc there. I like
Yeah.
hearing it. I'm gonna hit my dog. Sorry. Um, can't really blame him because the neighbor dog barks at him all the time, and so I can't really blame him.
We have a very vocal German Shepherd, so I know exactly where you're coming from.
So, um, in terms of Cab Franc in like the Napa and the Calistoga area, is there a lot out there? Like, do you see quite a bit? If you're out and about in your area, are you seeing other Cab Franc varietal wines there?
You definitely will see some, but not anywhere close to as much of a representation as Cabernet Sauvignon or what that has throughout the valley. Obviously, everybody kind of knows Napa for being a largely cab area. Quite a few people are using it for a blending varietal, like we were talking about before. So there aren't very many standalone Cab Francs, which is then nice to have that in our portfolio. A lot of the time when we're out doing tastings, we'll have people come up and realize that we actually have a varietal Cab Franc, and people always get very excited. So it's good
Right.
to see.
That I think I was 2 days ago. I was talking with Leah Jorgensen in Oregon, and she said the statement of people may not know Cab Franc, but those who know really know, and
Yep.
it's so true. People who are familiar with Cab Franc, we're like so geeked out on Cab Franc that we get excited if you walk in and you're like, oh my God, there's a Cab Franc. It's like, all right, like we'll go in and I have to contain myself to actually try other wines. if there's a Cab Franc on the tasting menu. You know.
Yeah, I've seen that at pourings too, where people will either not know what Cab Franc is, and so it's an opportunity to educate them about Cab Franc, or people are just very enthusiastic about Cab Franc and asking what style it is, and just very excited to taste it. So it's always good to see.
So let's say I'm a newbie. How do you explain Cab Franc to a newbie?
So typically, what I'll say is there's kind of a herbal green, Pirzini taste sometimes to it. You get a lot of green bell pepper. For our Cab Franc, given how hot it is in Calistoga, you get much more of a riper, fuller bodied Cabernet Franc. Still some nice dark chocolate, a little bit of graham cracker in there as well. We really like to blend each of the wines that we produce. So our Cab Franc is 82% Cab Franc, and then has equal parts of 6% Malbec, Merlot, and Petit Verdot. So especially the Petit Verdot that's in there really gives it a lot more structure. So this is a wine that could definitely hold up for quite a while.
Absolutely. So here it is in my glass. It never really works well on Instagram, but there it is in my glass. And it's a beautiful color. It is. I can read through it. So it's it's a paler to a medium color ruby. It's beautiful. And aromatic wise, the first thing that came to my mind was graham cracker, and it was like 2 seconds before you said graham cracker. Terry Sardi is saying hello to you in the chat.
Hi, Terry.
Yeah, so graham cracker, and then it does have the chocolate, and it's the kind of a darker chocolate, not a milky chocolate, and
yeah,
it is. Go ahead.
I was just gonna agree with you, kind of that dark baker's chocolate. Well,
And the
a lot of the
acidity is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the time we'll actually end up with wine dinners that we'll do. We'll use this as our dessert wine pairing because we don't necessarily have a dessert wine or a port wine or anything that we produce here on the property. And so it's fun to have something that pairs really well with a chocolate cake with some kind of a berry sauce on top. So it's kind of a fun wine to have to use for those occasions.
And I'm so glad you said that because red wine isn't exactly easy to pair dessert with, right? It's chocolate is not the friend of a lot, of a lot of like normal red wine. I mean, for my palate, I should say, you're not taking a Napa Cab and having a chocolate cake. But I think that Cab Franc, that versatility that Cab Franc has, it is awesome. You can pair it, and I've had it with this chocolate molten, like one of those volcano thingamajiggies, where you poke it and it just oozes out calories. With a blackberry Chambord type of whatever, you take that sauce and you soak up the juice so it's a little bit thicker. I'm not a cook.
I'm not a baker, so I can't.
Yeah. And Cab Franc pairs excellent with it. And this one, yours, I'll show the label again. So the Kenefick Ranch 2018. This I can totally see with that type of dessert, with that baker's chocolate, that ooze, that type of thing. I can totally see it.
Yeah, it's fun to use, and it is difficult to try to pair red wines with dessert. I feel like a lot of the time, at least in our household, we'll typically go for kind of more of a lighter dessert, a cheesecake or vanilla ice cream or something, in which case a red wine would really overpower that. But the Cab Franc holds up really well, especially with chocolate dessert, so it's quite tasty.
Yeah. Oh man, now I'm gonna have to make my husband go bake me something. So, although he says he likes to cook, he doesn't like to bake, but I'll make.
It's the same in our household. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, I'll make him bake. It was just my birthday on the 28th, and I told him I didn't want a cake, so he literally brought me a Reese's peanut butter cup with a candle in it, because I never say no to Reese's peanut butter cups. But now I'm going to say, you didn't make me a cake, so this is what I want with this wine. There you go.
Time for chocolate cake, yeah. And
yes,
happy late birthday as well.
Oh, thank you. So, Caitlin Select. Who's Caitlin?
Caitlin is my sister, my older
Oh,
sister. Yeah, yeah. So
is there a
we
Chris Select?
there is a Chris's Cuvée, yeah.
Okay.
So that is our Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon was the first varietal that we started producing. The second varietal in 2003 was our the first time that we started doing a Cabernet Franc. My dad was tasting it, and it just had these really beautiful, elegant notes to it, and so he decided to name it after my sister. So he called it the Caitlin Select. Then about a year later, he decided that it was only fair to name the big heavy cab after me. So that's where the Chris's Cuvée came from. But yeah, there's definitely a little bit of a sibling rivalry between the two of us. Thanksgiving last week, we had a bottle of Cab and Cab Franc open on the table, and so everybody was comparing and giving their own opinions on what they like better. So yeah, it's been fun to have that rivalry.
That actually does take a rivalry to a whole new level. We're not just talking which is the favorite sibling or which sibling is more athletic or whatever. Which sibling's wine is best on the table? There you go.
Exactly. Point scores and everything. We just go back and forth. Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Um, so on your ranch, your Cab Franc, how like what direction are the vines face? How are you kind of managing those vines?
So primarily everything is a little bit off from true west.
Okay.
That's this way as I'm sitting. So that really tries to protect the afternoon sun, but also get some nice exposure in the morning sun. So Calistoga here being very hot and having those really extreme heat days in the summer, we try to protect as much of one side of that as we possibly can. So as much as kind of off center from the west that we can do, that's the direction that everything is facing.
So trimming the leaves to give that dappled sunlight in the afternoon and a little bit more in the morning, right?
Yeah, little bit more morning exposure while it's still a little bit cooler. Calistoga actually has one of the biggest diurnal shifts out of anywhere in the
Mm.
valley, so we get the coolest nights and then the biggest difference between the coolest nights and the warmest days. So as it's kind of warming up in the morning, that's a good time for the sun to kind of get some direct exposure, and then try to keep it as protected as we can on the afternoon side.
And how was harvest this year for you guys? I mean, like most of California had that insane heats. I don't even think you can call it a spike when in Paso it was 12 days long.
Yeah.
That's past the spike. But so did you guys have that same kind of spike?
We did. We had the extreme spike. It was about here it was 6 days of over 100 degrees. And when I say over 100 degrees, that's putting it lightly. We only had 2 days that were about 105, and all the rest of the days were either 115 or 118,
Oh my
somewhere in there.
goodness.
So everything was very warm. Surprisingly, all the vines and the fruit actually held up really well. We definitely had a couple blocks where the sugars started to race up faster than I think anybody was expecting them to, but overall everything looked pretty good. We tried to utilize a little bit more shade cloth out here this year to try to
Oh, okay.
protect even the morning side, because at 7 a.m. it was already 75, 80 degrees, so it was warming up pretty quickly. So we did our best to try to protect it and just use it as a learning experience, and trying to make sure everything is smooth moving forward.
And so you held on. You didn't pick during the heat.
We were picking through the heat, so
You
we
were
we had
okay.
started to pick some white varietals right before the heat came in, and then of the people that we sell to, a couple people who were purchasing cab wanted to pick on the earlier side, but really
Mm.
once the Monday of the heat spike came in, we were starting to go full steam with everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, Cab Franc is one of those that kind of a lot of this vintage, especially, it seemed to have been, since it's not as compact of a cluster, some people were holding off and waiting because then right after the heat, I don't know, did you get rain also? Like after that
We
heat came the rain, and then now you're worried about something completely different.
Yeah, we did get rain. It was about a week and a half after the heat, so we had a good opportunity to get in there
Okay.
and try to get to some of the blocks. typically our harvest, really at its core, is only about 3.5 to 4 weeks long. So it's a pretty condensed harvest that we have. The majority of the Cab Franc we picked after the heat, though.
Mhm.
So that tended to hold up really well, and it fell into that little window of after the heat and before the rain. So it was picked at in ideal of time as we could possibly get.
See, Cab Franc knows these things. It just knows it.
It plans ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, at Kenefick Ranch, you guys are both Napa Green and fish friendly. So, um, like, what can you briefly tell, like, what those two certifications mean, and then why do you feel it's important to follow that?
Yeah, so in general, both Napa Green and fish friendly farming are trying to make sure that you are more or less leaving as little impact on the land as possible, and using as little harmful chemicals as you can that have the potential of running off into the Napa rivers and further into the San Francisco Bay Area, where we are obviously, and throughout any of the world, everything leads down into streams and rivers, and then eventually into the oceans. And so the main goal of both those is just trying to have as little impact as possible on the land. So we try to do everything here as sustainably farmed as we possibly can. Obviously, there are some pests that might come in that really have the potential for ruining a crop completely, and we try to protect ourselves against those. But otherwise, we're as sustainably farmed as possible, and really just trying to be stewards of the land while we're here to make sure that it lasts for many generations moving forward.
And so you're the second generation. Is there a third generation?
There is a third generation that will, fingers crossed, be here in about a month. So
Oh,
yeah,
congratulations.
thank you. So early January, we're expecting our firstborn. So that'll be the third generation.
Oh, congratulations. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
thank you.
That is wonderful. And now I was looking, and you have a couple of options with your club. And so what are, first of all, is Cab Franc always an option in your club? And then what are the varying levels of your club?
Yeah, so we have two different levels of our club, either the collectors club, which is 3 bottles quarterly, and then the case club, which is a case quarterly. In each of those, we have 4 shipments every year, so March, May, September, November. We'll always suggest wines for each one of those club shipments, either a small release wine or a pre-release of something that has not come out on the market yet. Um, Anybody who's in the club then has the option to pick and choose what wines they actually want in their shipment.
Oh.
So if they don't change any of that, and we're offering Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Sauvignon for that shipment, those will be the two that will go out. But if somebody is a Cab Franc lover and wants 3 bottles of Cab Franc for every shipment, then they have the option to do that as well. So it gives the customer a lot of versatility. So it's really nice.
I like those people who just want Cab Franc in every shipment.
Exactly. We have a few of those. So yeah, we like them too.
It really is it is a beautiful wine. I'm going back to the tasting of it, is just that chocolate that's there, and I love that graham cracker that is in there, and that is a telltale to me of a Cab Franc, but it's not always. It's like when I smell graham cracker, I know it's a Cab Franc, but it's not always in there, and it's such a beautiful thing. So, like, what do you think is, what's your soil type that you're on that's providing that, or do you think it's the rootstock, the clone? What do you think is providing that? Is that every vintage, or is this a vintage note?
It's pretty common of the varietal here on our property. So it's not just this one vintage that all of a sudden is having a blowout of graham cracker in there. We were extremely fortunate with the property that we're on here. My dad kind of stumbled on this property, and it has some beautiful soils, mainly volcanic soils that are all throughout the
Oh,
property. But our the two ends, kind of what I was describing earlier, the far end of our property, and then the home side of our property, are both kind of bookended by two canyons as they come up. So part of that hillside you're seeing here behind me, that's given a lot of the soil that's been on the hillside, kind of spreading out the alluvial fan across the valley floor down here. So we have a lot of different soils that are here, and then just the growing climate is really kind to Cabernet Franc, and produces it in the style that we really like, where it's on that riper side and a little bit more full-bodied as well.
Yeah, so I am not a fan of bell pepper in my Cab Franc. You know, I know that the Loire Valley, I know, you know, there's regions that make exceptional Cab Franc that just, that's what it is. And for those who haven't been watching previous, you know, Instagram lives or don't follow me on a regular basis, right? We know that Cab Franc, that bell pepper, that pyrazine breaks down in the sunlight. So there's things that you can do in the vineyard to eliminate that bell pepper. To me, I'd rather taste the fruit than a bell pepper.
Yeah, I was
don't get any
surprised
bell pepper here. This is beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was surprised. I was very used to our Cabernet Franc really when I was first starting to get into more of the wine world, and especially our Cabernet Franc. But I was used to only tasting ours, and then I would go out and start to taste others. I would be very surprised at how vegetal and tasted like I was biting into a green bell pepper. So I was very happy that ours was kind of held a lot more of that fruit and was on a little bit more of the riper side.
Yeah, I get it. I get the, you know, the regions that they just can't, you know, ripen to fullness or whatever. And you gain a palate for whatever you're used to tasting. You know, so my palate to Cab Franc came from California. It came from the warmer climates. So I'm just, you know, I'm just a fan of tasting the fruit. I just think that Cab Franc has such beautiful fruit and, you know, offers that you're hiding what it really can do. You know, it's like wearing the, you know, the Phantom of the Opera mask of bell pepper, you know.
Covering half the wine, yeah.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. So what do you think, if you had to say one thing about Cab Franc, like you've just finished a master class on Cabernet Franc, and people, you want them to remember one thing about Cabernet Franc, what do you think that is?
I would say in general about the varietal, I would say it's very versatile. So it's not just a one-dimensional grape varietal that's out there, or that you're going to know it's going to be exactly one flavor every time. Every different Cabernet Franc that you open is not going to be that green bell pepper. There are plenty of different Cabernet Francs out there. So I think in general, a versatile varietal would be my one describing factor for it.
Okay. And I should have asked this earlier in the interview, but how does your father go from being a neurosurgeon to deciding to buy land to grow grapes?
It was kind of right place, right time. I think in general, he when he was in college, he was really starting to get into wine and really appreciating wine more. When he moved from Minnesota out to San Francisco, it was in the late 60s. And so into the early 70s was really when Napa Valley was starting to put its name on the map. Before that, even growing up in Minnesota, his dad would always take him out for kind of these long drives into the fields of Wisconsin. And so he was always a big fan and very proud of getting his hands dirty, more or less. He wanted to be out in the field and wanted to do something that involved the land and involved farming. And so as the 70s were going on and Napa was gaining popularity, he kind of turned his sights up here and fell in love with the town of Calistoga. And yeah, I guess the rest is history.
It is a cute little town. I haven't been there in forever, but it's a cute town to like walk around in, and there's wine to offer, but there's other things there that just make it, you know, a nice place to visit. And I do remember I got a mud bath. That was my first mud bath was there. And Dr.
Wilkinson,
yeah.
Yep. I have yet to get a mud bath, so I will say that honestly that I have not had a mud bath, But yeah, Calistoga is really known as being a resort kind of destination town. It's not to say that the rest of Napa is very touristy, but Calistoga has done a really good job of holding its roots and keeping true to what it is. And like you were saying, there are so many cute shops and restaurants and everything that you can just walk up and down the streets here. So it's quite a fun town.
Yeah, I have to get back. It's been a long time, but I definitely need to get back.
You let
So,
me know. We'll share a glass of Cab Franc.
all right, game on, game on. Um, so is this the only Cab Franc you make? You make the one Cab Franc?
Yes, yeah, we'll still use the grapes here in a couple other wines as a blender, but as a varietal Cab Franc, this is the one Cabernet Franc that we produce.
Okay. And so what other wines do you make? So when people come to your website to buy your Cab Franc, you know, I tell people all the time, you can buy one bottle, but you're paying a lot of shipping for one bottle. If you just bump it up to three, it's like $1 more. So you're
Hmm.
saving on all that shipping. So what other varieties can people purchase from you?
The main core of our portfolio, or really what we're known for, is our Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet
Oh,
Franc, and Cabernet Sauvignon. So those are kind of the three big standouts. On top of that, we produce a Rhone style white blend, which is Grenache, Marsanne, and Viognier, which is very tasty and tends to age very well as well. We offer a Merlot, a red varietal, a red blending varietal that's mainly Petit Verdot, but has Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot in it. And then we have our two reserve wines as well, a reserve Cabernet Sauvignon and reserve Bordeaux blend, which is basically equal parts of each of the five Bordeaux varietals. So
oh,
kind of
nice.
a fun representation from across the property.
And this Cab Franc you had said is 82% Cab Franc. That every vintage it changes, but does it have the same? Do you always put the same blended grapes together, but in different percentages?
We'll kind of pick and choose. Every year it will change slightly. We'll try to keep some consistency, but also try to make the best wine that vintage gives us to make. So if there was a wine or a varietal that the flavors really weren't there that vintage, then we'll leave that out on blending this together. Versus if there was another varietal that's really showing really well that year, then we'll put that in. Same thing with the Cabernet Franc. Obviously, being a Cabernet Franc needs to be at least 75% Cabernet Franc. But in there, we'll go as high as about 90%, but then typically leave the rest for blending.
And you pick varietals that it loves to play with. I mean, those they go well together, and they
Hmm.
provide it. But I think it's a beautiful wine, and I just think that the chocolate, the graham cracker is something that everybody can enjoy. It's and this is a compliment. So I sometimes I say things that don't really sound like a compliment or whatever, but sometimes Cab Francs, I think one of the problems with Cab Francs is that because people aren't familiar with the grape variety itself, when they taste it, sometimes the Cab Francs are so evolved, like there's just too much. It's unbalanced. There's just too much going on. And that scares people away from Cab Franc. And this wine to me is so well balanced. The acidity is there. So this is a 2018 and it's drinking beautifully now, but there's no problem. I have no doubt you can lie this down and drink it years from now because of that backbone to it. But it's such a beautiful palette that I think this would bring people to Cab Franc to start searching for more Cab Franc.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a Cab Franc that changes people's minds if for whatever reason they weren't a fan of it before or if they hadn't heard of it. And then, like you said, we usually recommend that it ages about 10 to 15 years, but we've had some Cabernet Francs from the early 2000s and they've been tasting beautifully. So it'll definitely hold up for quite a while.
Yeah, it will. It is beautiful. And so how can people find Kenefick Ranch? How do they get to you?
The best way is through our website, kenefickranch.com. We have all of our wines available on the shop page there. At some point, eventually, we're in the planning process for it, but we're going to try to open a winery and tasting room on site here. Until then, unfortunately, we don't have a tasting experience on property, but something to look forward to in the future.
Fantastic. So they just can go online and taste. Do you do wine? You know, you had said that you do dinners or whatever. So can they look at like local restaurants and things? Do you have a newsletter that they can sign up for so they know where to find you if you're out and about?
Yeah, we have a newsletter that they can sign up for on our website. We also have an events page, so we try to get out and about on the road and show our wines in different local areas. We're distributed in about 15 different states, and so we're typically doing events all throughout the year, hopefully in somebody's area that they're looking for.
That's wonderful. And so I will say I saved a little because so that I can raise my glass and say slancha. So thank you so much for coming on and thank you for sharing. Ooh, it is, I mean, I feel so stupid because I really can talk better about wine, but it just like when I sit down, I can do tasting notes so much better than when I'm talking about it. But you know, it is a beautiful wine. And I think that this is a wine for Cab Franc people and to bring people to Cab Franc. So thank you for doing that, for making a wine that's going to bring more people to this fantastic grape variety. And
Yeah.
I didn't ask, what is the retail of this approximately?
Retail is $50.
Okay, so definitely something that is doable. So they can just head over to your website, place an
Mm-hmm.
order, get some Cab Franc, and then let order one of those Chris cuvées or whatever, so that it's not a total out balance between Caitlin and him. Make him
Yeah, you gotta pick a sibling, and taste both to really know. Might as well just order a couple bottles of each
Might
just
as
so you
well.
can revisit. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much. It was a
Thank you
pleasure
very
talking
much,
to you. Have a great week and slancha.
Slancha. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, and Terry is saying, thank you both so much. This was great. Still enjoying Kenefick Ranch wine. So thank you, Terry.
Thanks,
So I
Terry.
will be enjoying this for quite some time too. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.